And we are recording. It is so good to be here with you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Okay, we are almost at 6. And so, we are live. Want to say hello and greetings to each of you in your respective places. And I am wondering, those of us who are working, or those of us who are leading teams in the workplace, do you feel engaged? Do you feel, I know a lot of people will say happy, but happiness really is different from engagement, but they do parallel. And according to a recent study that was conducted in SMARP.com, which conducted some research and also wrote an article on 8 employee engagement statistics, they wanted to know what was the status and some data. You know, we're all about data here on this platform. Wanted to know how many employees are really engaged in the workplace. And believe it or not, only 15% of those who they interviewed, 600 individuals from employers who had 50 to 500 employees total, only 15% said they were engaged. 85% said they were not. Well, welcome to Conversations in the Nick of Time. I am your host, Nikki Roach, sponsored and backed and powered by Sparkman Pathway to Careers and KSTL 690 AM here in St. Louis, Missouri. Welcome to Conversations in the Nick of Time. You know, here on this platform, we explore and expose leadership strategies that lead us to excellence, but also gives us some hope after some accidents. And we know that both of them are required to lead in the purpose on purpose. And today, to help us navigate this amazing topic, actually growing topic when we talk about employee engagement, is the Pam Weston. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me, Nikki.
Awesome. Yes, right. Loosen up. We have fun here. Just a conversation.
Yes.
I am so excited to have you, and the timing could not be better. Those of you who are not familiar with Pam Weston, she is the people guru. And I'm loving this title, the people guru, and she's empowering leaders to connect to people, to connect people to purpose. She's a communication strategist, an employee engagement expert, grant-making leader, just to name a few things that she has done. She also is the author of a popular, ever-growing book titled Executive Briefing, People, P-E-O-P-L-E, Goals. Also contains the leader tips that many readers are raving about to their colleagues. And she has written 3 articles that is published and already placed on LinkedIn. If you want to learn more about her, we will of course post some of this information after the interview. But with all that, let's start off with, what is engagement?
Yeah, so we think about employee engagement, it's an emotional connection. So it's an emotional connection that employees have to their organization, whether it's a corporation or nonprofit, and that influences their level of effort that they're willing to put out toward their work-related activities. So that's what employee engagement is how employees feel connected to the organization.
And then why is it so important?
Well, so if an employee is not engaged, then it will impact their productivity. So you want to make sure that as a manager, as a leader, that you are building productive relationships with your teams so that you can help increase their employee engagement. And from my perspective, I think about it as it's all about building relationships and focusing on the connections before the profits.
But what we do know that is so interesting is that oftentimes we are so focused, we being leaders of organizations,
Yeah.
on the dollars. We want to make the dollars. But so you're educating us today that the fact that, yes, you want to make dollars, but you can't make dollars without the people, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, and it's important that they know, look, so we know what our goals are in terms of our quarterly performance metrics, how much we want to gain year over year. But a lot of times employees don't know what their goals are in terms of the work that they should be accomplishing. So it's about the manager shifting their mindset so that they will start to think about people as well as profits to make sure that they're able to have a productive year or productive quarter. You know, you mentioned,
Yeah,
go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, you mentioned some statistics when we first started, you know, to just show how important, you know, employee engagement is. And so I always look at the Gallup poll, and they do these employee engagement surveys every so often. And one of the most recent surveys, only 33% of employees were engaged. And then only 29% of the managers were engaged. And then it went on to talk about only 45% of executives being engaged. So, you know, those numbers tell us that there's a lot of work to do at all levels in an organization. So that, I mean, that's why it's important. You know, it affects between 480 up to $608 billion per year. And that was pre-COVID.
We're going to get to that. So on this same report, in alignment with what you're saying, one of the downfalls, it says low employee engagement companies $450 to $500 billion each year, according to the study. Disengaged employees will cost these companies. That's a lot of money. And while someone listening may say, "Oh, I'm just an entrepreneur. I have, or I'm a solopreneur, and I don't have any employees." You still need to be mindful, because I always say, even if you're a solopreneur, you still have a team. You have vendors, you have suppliers, you have marketing team people. I don't care if they're volunteering or doing an internship. That's still your team, and you have to keep them engaged, because if not, you're constantly spending time training people.
Exactly. And then also think about, you know, if you're an entrepreneur, think about your clients as well. You know, you want to be able to build the great relationships with those folks. One of the people that read my book pretty early on was a former president that I worked for, and he's in sales, been in sales all his life. And his takeaway from it was, this is a great way for me to help my sales leaders understand how important it is to build those connections and relationships with our partners. So, you know, it goes in a lot of areas. Engagement is important all around because it's about building the relationships.
Yeah, and let's park ourselves there just for a little bit, because that's a great point that you raise in regards to the relationship. And I mentioned in the intro, like, are you happy or are you engaged? That is two different things. And I know I will even tell people. So what was your response during your interview, when they told you about your level of happiness or the things that they would do to keep you happy on the job? And most people look at me with their head tilted like, that wasn't a question. And I say, exactly. Your job's not supposed to make you happy, but go ahead and you explain to us how we as employees, how do we understand engagement and expectations?
So, just think about, like, in our normal lives as a customer of an organization, we hear a lot about companies online or in the news that have been touted as having happy and engaged employees, right? So think about Chick-fil-A. You know, they've been recognized for, you know, having employees that put forth the extra effort, go all the way out to make sure that the customer is satisfied. So when I go to Chick-fil-A, I expect to have a great customer experience, right? I anticipate them greeting me with a smile and saying my pleasure at the end of the transaction, right?
Expect it.
Yep, I expect that. And, you know, and I walk out feeling good because, you know, I was happy to pay for the experience. You know, one time I went to Chick-fil-A through the drive-through near where I live and for lunch. And, you know, of course, they greeted me with a smile. They provided my order. And when I got ready to pay, I did not have my debit card or any cash, right? So I was kind of embarrassed and looking for my card and everything. And the worker came back and it's like, well, no worries, it's on us today. And, of course, with a smile. And so I'm like still trying to look and everything. And at this point, the worker was leaning out of the window, handing me my food. And he's like, it's no problem. He's sharing concern for me, it's no problem. It's okay. It's on us today. Enjoy your day. Have a blessed day. And so I found my card a week later in a jacket that I had worn. Right. So, and what I did was the next time I went to Chick-fil-A, to that drive-through, I paid it forward just because of the experience I had with them. So this is just one example of, as a customer, how we see firsthand how employee engagement impacts the bottom line, and as a result, our interactions with the employees there.
And you end up paying it forward. So you invested.
Right. They made me feel good about my experience. I believed that employee was happy and engaged, and I appreciated it. And I just felt like, it was something that I wanted to do in exchange as well. There's a quote by Simon Sinek. I know a lot of people follow him. And he says, customers will never love a company until employees love it first. Right. That Chick-fil-A story, that's an example of what that quote means.
Now, take us on the opposite extreme of this when we talk about this employee engagement, but the lack of thereof of engagement.
Yeah. So there's always another side of it. There was a pretty popular story probably about 4 years ago that, from here in St. Louis, but it was talked about all over, with Wells Fargo. They were fined $185 million in 2016 for fraudulent sales behavior, right? So they were, for lack of a better word, they were forcing their employees to create fake accounts for their customers. And by doing that, that created a culture of, distrust among employees. And initially, the former CEO, he communicated that, this wasn't a result of our sales practices. This is not a result of our culture. It's not indicative of our strategy or our plan. But it was all found to be otherwise, because employees started speaking up and saying, how they really felt, and how they felt like they were pressured to generate these sales despite any unreasonable quotas or anything. So that's an example of how, if an employer doesn't put people first, what can happen. They put profits over employees. If they would have really valued employees and were concerned about their well-being, as a leader of an organization, no matter if you're the CEO, a manager, or supervisor, you have to have that employee first mindset. So that's an example of, how it can go the wrong way. And unfortunately, it went really wrong for them. Employees were, disengaged. There was a public, outcry about it. So, leaders have to really, place people over profits in order to, get the best productivity. And then, it could impact their bottom line in a positive way.
Yeah. Same report that I'm reading off of. They say companies with highly engaged workforce are 21% more profitable, just to reaffirm what you just mentioned to us.
Yeah.
While employees engagement isn't just about the soft, tangible, and feeling-based reviews, but also about the well-being of your employees. Again, reaffirming what you just said. And this is about the Gallup's report, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Our work units that scored the highest on employee engagement showed 21% higher levels of profitability than units with the lower quartile. And those companies with highly engaged workforce also scored 17% higher on productivity. So that's another area that raises when you're engaging your employees.
Exactly. Right. And I think about, like, a few years ago, I started thinking about employee engagement as like the elephant in the room in most workplaces, right? So, the elephant in the room, just to give an example, is a situation or a risk that everybody knows and they're aware of, but nobody wants to address it in a real way. And when we think about it, that's employee engagement, because we're hearing about all these, you're sharing these figures and statistics. I've shared some. There have been 30 plus years of statistics and steps to improve engagement, but we're still seeing that these numbers are, trending low. And that's because, in my opinion, these tips and tactics won't work until we start thinking about the people first, and then actually focusing on building the relationships. So it definitely will impact your productivity, and that's been proven in all the stats that you've shared.
Yeah. Now, let's step back a little bit, and I'm curious, how is it that this became a work of passion for you? I know you've worked with a host of companies. Those who have not already gone over to thepamweston.com. I love saying that. The Pam Weston, who I met by way of Anita Applebaum Thompson, who is residing outside of the STL, but we still keep in touch. And she was like, you've got to get her on. But I want to know how and why you arrived at this point, because this is a very evolving topic. But you've been in it for a while. Why?
Yeah, so most of my career, I've worked in internal communications, executive communications, and other areas, public relations as well. So I've always worked with leaders, helping them to develop their programs to communicate more effectively with their teams.
Okay.
And probably at this point, about 6 years ago, I had an idea to write a guide to help these leaders as they're interacting with their teams, more so focusing on the relationships that they're building. And probably about 2 years ago, I just thought about it again. I revisited that idea, and I decided to move forward with writing executive briefing people goals.
Yeah. Now, then once you began to bring this writing to fruition, how is it that you began? Because I know many of us have great ideas, but you coupled the writing with the work that you were already doing. How did you even begin that process?
Yeah, so I have to go back. So I've always, in my roles, I've always been an employee advocate, right? So I've been in roles where I was like the liaison between the senior leadership and employees. So I was in a unique position to understand, what employees were thinking. They felt comfortable enough with me to share feedback. And then, from the executive perspective, and I was able to help merge those two things to make sure that employees were being communicated to in a way where they felt and understood how they fit into the organization. And then on the other end, I was able to help executives communicate their strategy in a way to make sure that it connected with the people. So I developed this passion for being an employee advocate and making sure that employees knew how they fit into an organization. And that is what drove me to ultimately writing the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. Makes sense but I love the fact, again, this work that you've been doing for years, then you find out it's a calling, and then there's this point to where you're like, oh, I'm in the middle. Let me how do I communicate outward from the middle to both sides?
Right. And, and like initially the book was the idea was to provide a guide for managers, aspiring managers, executives who are in the responsibility of leading people, right? But it's also a book for communication practitioners like myself. We find ourselves in situations where we're guiding these leaders, and it's a toolkit that they can use as well.
Okay. Now, in this toolkit, we'll unpack some of that in a moment. In regards to being in the workplace today, well, before today, let me say before today, what were some myths that you had to debunk regarding employee engagement prior to COVID?
Well, I'll just say, so I'll just share us, change the names to protect the innocent. But no, so, working with some leaders, of course they're driven by, performance and profits, mostly profits. So one of the things working with some leaders, really, I had to really take on the role of making sure they understood how important it was for them to communicate at a level where they were being heard. So they, I would go and travel to different locations with different leaders. And when we come back, employees would do the survey and say, I still don't understand how I fit into this organization, or I don't understand. I understand what his goals are, but what are my goals to make it happen? So having some courageous conversations and really saying and showing the actual data, this is what employees are saying. We want to make sure that we connect with them. And it's important that they not only see you, but when they see you, it's important that they hear and feel what you're saying and can move forward after you leave. And I actually had a leader say to me, well, I don't understand. Tell me more about that. So that was an opportunity for me to really break down to them the importance of employees just don't want to know about numbers. They want to know how they can help you meet the goals of the organization and how they fit in. So just having a lot of those conversations throughout the different roles that I've had has been one of the biggest things that I've had to do that I feel has been received by a lot of leaders that I've worked with and help them, change how they interacted with employees.
Okay. Now, one thing you mentioned in regards to making sure that employees understand where they fit in to the goals and the vision.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking like value added, right? Like, how do I add value?
Yeah, so think about like if you're a leader, every year what your goals are, what your numbers should be for the year, right? But as an employee, they should have that same sense of direction for the year as well. And so it's on the managers. I like to talk about managers owning it. Managers should own the experiences that employees have with them. And that includes making sure that they know where they're going for the year.
Mm-hmm. And unpack owning it for a manager. What does that mean? And how does that show up?
Yeah, so it means that when you're working with your team, if you have a team of 1 or a team of 2, 12, or 10, you are the leader of that team. And it's important for you to set the atmosphere for what your employees experience while they're working with you. If you have an employee who has other direct reports and they're performing in a way that is not in accordance to the culture of the organization, owning it means you address that situation and make sure that employees know that this is not acceptable and that the way that you're leading is the way that you want to flow throughout the rest of your organization. It also means that as a manager, you own it and make sure that your team knows where they're going. You check in. You do little things like, you speak to your employees when you see them in the hallway. You make them feel comfortable in their work environment. You make sure that their job is aligned to their skill set. If it's not, you help them grow into another role.
Now, there are times when leaders, since we're there,
Mm-hmm.
managers of departments and teams are not as equipped as they need to be to address such issues. What kind of recommendation or strategies do you have for those who, like, in my head I want to do it, but I can't get my actions aligned to execute, to really engage? And engagement sometimes is correction, right?
Right. And I think that managers are the most influential people in an organization.
Why is
you
that?
know, because you think about who has the power to unleash creativity and execution in your company. It's your manager because they have all these people reporting to them, and it's the managers at every level in the organization. So I think it's important for organizations overall to invest in developing their leaders because a lot of times leaders or managers are put into roles based on their technical performance. They've been able to master this technical skill, so they were advanced, but no one ever spent the time to tell them about managing a team, what's important to your employees, how you build those relationships to make sure that you're connected and engaged. You know, as a manager, you know, it's important for you to just stop sometimes and say, hey, am I connected? You know, and what do I need to do to work on myself in order to make sure that I am?
Yeah. What one strategy would you give to a leader, manager,
Mm-hmm.
to engage?
Well, I would say prioritize people. That's the number one thing that I always talk about.
Interesting. Prioritize
So,
people.
and what I mean by that is, you know, of course, make people a priority. So it requires you to shift your mindset so that you begin to value people. So once you're able to, and you think about what prioritize means, it's about you organize things so that the most important thing is done first, right? So as a leader, you ensure that your employees have a clear sense of the direction and that they are aligned with your team. And that'll help them to, you know, I think that'll help with the engagement, number one, for them, but it also helps you overall with your team and meeting your goals.
Yeah. I know. I think back on a past experience that I had, and I carried it over into my current employment that I currently have. And what's interesting is that back in maybe about 7 years ago, when I landed truly blessed by an opportunity that afforded me the chance to sit in the C-suite with the CEO, the president, and
Mm-hmm.
to assist. And what was interesting is that because of my past experience with a boss, I was not engaged, but yet I was being evaluated every 12 months by someone who did not engage me for those 12 months. I thought that was very awkward.
Yeah.
So moving forward, and this is where I want to shift our conversation, as employees, as an employee, what I did, I took it upon myself and asked my boss, the president, for prioritized time, as you just mentioned, and I'm using your language.
Yes.
But I'm like, I would like to meet at least once or twice a month for 30 minutes just to share some different things that I'm working on, some challenges I may be happening, some opportunities I may witness. And as you're giving me a charge for different projects. The short of the long, she liked that idea so much, we end up meeting every week for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed us to get to know each other, but we built so much trust that I'm still in very close contact with this former boss. And she ended up having all of her direct reports do it once a month, because we end up slacking back and doing it like once a month, but we would always talk every week anyway, which turned into one of those moments. But she learned so much about me. I learned so much about her, but we also figured out how to complement each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
And we were able to, she would pass off projects to me that were passion projects for me, but I didn't have that exposure. She gave me her platforms on several opportunities, which totally shifted, again, that relationship, but it developed trust.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, I will go to bat for that boss if I needed to, because it was that level of intentional engagement, which was a lot of questions. It wasn't, I think, because we sometimes think, oh, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. All you're doing is ask. She asked a lot of questions at the beginning.
Right.
But I, again, it wasn't her initial idea. It was something I took charge on. So with that, what kind of responsibilities as an employee should we be taking?
Yeah, so good for you, first of all, for, you know, taking the initiative to improve your work environment, you know, to speak up on what you were experiencing. And it's a great thing to hear that your employer was acceptable to that, as receptive to that. So as an employee, you know, we do have a responsibility. You know, as I said, managers own, you know, I feel like managers really own setting the atmosphere where we work together. And as an employee, you should feel empowered to make sure that you are in an environment where you're growing and thriving. And if you're not experiencing that, you do have a right to speak up, to express those things. So you can have that conversation like you did with your manager and come to them with some ideas of, these are some things that I would like for us to implement to help us engage, or you may not have to say engage because, they may not want to hear engage, but, have those conversations. So yeah, speaking up and, looking for opportunities to work across the organization in other areas to build your skill set as well, may also help as well.
Now let's do some strategies. I know you kind of walked through some of this in the book, but just some few strategies, because there's probably some managers like, okay, let's get to the nitty gritty in regards to like, what are things that I can do? Because we're talking about engagement, we're talking about taking the lead. And so we'll start with our leaders and our managers, and then we'll go into those who are employees. And then, like, what can they do? Like, what are some strategies that they can follow? We'll start with the managers.
Yeah, so I'll just say this. So number one, I said, prioritize people. We've talked through that, right? But right now in the area of COVID, be flexible. Yeah. Be flexible. The biggest thing we can do right now as a leader is be flexible, because everything is different for employees. We have people who are working from home, so they may be caring for other people within their household that will impact how they show up at work. And they need to know that their manager, leader, or boss is okay and cares enough about them to give them leeway to figure this whole thing out, because we're all figuring it out. So I would say be flexible, and even think about it's 9 to 5 mandatory. If you're a professional and you're able to accomplish your work, you may be able to have that conversation with your leader depending on the type of work that you do, and still meet objectives. And then also the biggest thing that I'm always going to come back to, I would say, build relationships. Intentionally connect with employees. This can be as simple, like I said, as saying hello.
We laugh about that, but that is real.
Yeah.
Like, how many times have you walked past someone and you look them dead in the eye, but then by the time you get shoulder to shoulder and your arms are swinging next to you, you look down.
Yeah. If you're in the elevator, say hello to the people in the elevator. If you are in the cafeteria, stop by and chat at a table. You don't have to stay there the whole time. Just say hello.
Speak to the workers.
Yeah, and open that door. So just little things like that. If you join a team call, you don't have to stay for the whole meeting, but just join a team call. Show that you're interested in the work that these employees are doing. That can mean a lot to them. So I would say, definitely do things to build relationships, and also demand accountability. And I think this is a big thing for most organizations, because a lot of times, we may have a leader that's performing very well, but their team is suffering because they're in a situation where they have a bad manager. Everybody knows that this person is a bad manager, but nobody's.
And we call them bad. We consider them bad. Why? Is it because they don't have the people skills?
Number one, they don't have the people skills. They're not developing their teams. Okay. Their employees are not empowered to perform in any way.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you have a manager that's exhibiting these behaviors that don't inspire their teams to perform, address it immediately.
And so you're the leadership of organizations with those middle managers and even high C-level, C-suite.
Exactly.
All need to be held accountable.
Yeah, there needs to be accountability across the organization. And I don't think you should ever ignore it and allow 1 or 2 people to become the norm on your team or in your business. That can just totally destroy your character, because you're allowing it to happen. And then it just demoralizes your team. And then I think the biggest thing about, being a good leader or a good manager or building employee engagement is to be intentional. You have to plan. You have to own the responsibility that you have to manage your team. And I think that's one of the biggest things. I always say that managers have an opportunity to assess, how they're doing in order to shape their approach. You have the leeway to change and try to do better. So own that responsibility and be intentional in how you interact with your teams.
I love the accountability, because I don't think that's really let me say that's new for me on this platform in regards to holding leaders accountable for their level and their contribution or lack thereof when it comes to engagement
Mm-hmm.
in this type of intentional way. And I say that because oftentimes we are just only looking at outcomes, data. When I say outcomes, meaning did we make our quota?
Yeah.
How many widgets did we make per hour? Did we reduce the budget line by 1,000 because we made less mistakes? But not have I educated my team on changed policies? Have I educated them on, or offered them the opportunity to have some type of development? Those different types of things, because you're investing in them. And
Exactly.
that, as I'm hearing from you, it's not so much that you're always having to spend dollars, but it could be saying good morning.
Right. And, when we talk about, managers, we know that managers have a lot of things that they have to worry about, that they have to, make sure that are in order as their days go along. But I think that it's important for them to also make employees the number one thing that they worry about when they go about their day.
Oh, yeah. And then what's interesting, because of my diversity and inclusion efforts and work, for the first time, we have 5 generations in the workplace working side by side. Those traditionalists who are the older of the 5 are not retiring.
Mm-hmm.
And those who have retired, many have gone back. And they are remaining in the workplace, but working with all of these 4 others. And so when we talk about, I know some people will say, oh, the loyalty when it comes to working for an employer, it's not the same. It's not supposed to be the same, I think, because times have changed. And because we're so technology dependent, literally they're going to be embedded in our right hands or left hands in a moment, because that's how attached we are to them. How would you say that working with all these different generations in this tech space, like we cannot do without it, and now we are more and more finding ourselves shifting into this remote workforce, and some of us won't be going back face to face in the building with others. How can a manager approach that scenario?
Yeah. So from my perspective, we have, like you said, different generations in the workplace. We're dealing with technology. But when we get through with all of that, it's about making the connection, right? So it again starts with your mindset. You have to want to make the connection. You have to want to make sure that your employees are connected. So like we all, or most people have heard of Iyanla Vanzant, the life coach, right? And so one of the things that she always says when she's working with some of her people on the fix your life or fix their life, we have to call a thing a thing. Right. So we can have all of these other things like technology or, different generations that we want to put up as a reason why maybe we're not connecting, but we have to call a thing. And that means we have to be honest with ourselves about verbalizing our true understanding of the situation. And as a manager, we have to just be honest and just say, am I connected with my team? If I'm not, then I need to own that, own my part with it, and then deal with it, as Iyanla would say. And, in the case of employee engagement, Gallup reported that 75% of employees who voluntarily leave do so because of their boss. That is the thing. And that's the major reason why I feel like managers should take some type of action, no matter what barriers you feel are there, or if you consider technology a barrier, if you feel a certain generation a barrier, you just have to own it as a leader, and you're expected to rise to a certain level and ensure that your team has a good experience while they're working with you.
Wonderful. Now, shifting to the employee when it comes to even this virtual space. What are things that we need to do and can do, or consider, I should say, as we want to feel more engaged? Because while it is, yes, the role of the leader to
Mm-hmm.
engage, I still think there's a level of accountability on our side as an employee to make
Right.
meeting them in the middle,
Right.
part of the way.
Right. And you have some managers who will, they'll reach out and they'll ask their employees, how's everything going? And then we'll say, oh, it's okay. But then when we talk to our friends, we have a totally different story.
Can't
So I
stand
think
that
that
way, right?
exactly. So I think that from an employee perspective, we dealing in the, this environment where most people are working remotely, and it's even more important to feel connected. We have to be honest as employees to make sure that we're responding when asked, or even when not asked, how we're really feeling. If we are in a fortunate situation where our manager actually cares enough to say, how are you doing? Or, is there something I can do for you? Take that opportunity and speak up about it. And it's not a negative thing. It's not a negative thing at all.
But you saw my face shift because oftentimes we're like, no, like speaking up. There's a whole area of research called psychological safety, where employees need to be able to feel comfortable and safe, um,
Mm-hmm.
and not feel like there's going to be retaliation in any way that will come their way by being honest. And some cultures are just not there, I believe. But I do feel that it should be that way.
Mm-hmm.
You should not have to feel as if you can't speak up, because if you do speak up about something, small or large, that you'll get retaliated against. And retaliation meaning considered too aggressive, considered not ready, not mature enough to deal with people. The list goes on and on and on, but that is real. So how do we face that?
Yeah, so a lot of times you hear people say, like the things you say that you may be perceived about you if you were to speak up for yourself. A lot of times we can't control how other people think, feel, or what they may even do, but we can control how we respond to what they do.
Yeah.
I would just encourage employees to, if you're in a situation where you're not engaged or connected, and you feel truly that your manager is not helping you grow, you can work within your organization to be put into a role where you are able to be more productive and thrive. And no matter what you do, there's going to be a consequence. But if you're stuck in the same spot, you already know what that consequence is. So I would just encourage you to, take that action. You can reach out to human resources. You can identify a mentor in the organization that can help you navigate your relationship with your manager, because sometimes it's not receptive when you say it, but if it's someone else that they value says it, it may end up helping you in the long run.
Right. And again, that topic is called psychological safety. There's a bunch of research on it that's out there. And I'm telling you, regardless of the industry in which you find yourself as a leader, you want to make sure that you are positively creating a culture, whether that's you being an entrepreneur, whether that's you being over a Fortune 500, a small nonprofit, faith-based.
Yeah.
You need to have, if you're wanting to grow and move forward, because a lot of times we will have leaders with great vision, but they can't move the vision and they can't put legs and arms on the vision. Why? Because the people aren't engaged and they don't feel safe psychologically to even share or to even contribute, which it may be that they might even have some even better ideas, because oftentimes we underestimate, I think, our employees. They are on the front line, so they know how things are working. As leaders, most of the time we're in vision space,
Right.
not operational space.
And that's why I think it's important. So, you may have an employee who doesn't feel empowered to, ask that question or to identify another opportunity. But that's why I feel like it's more important for managers to own this space and create the space where their employees will feel empowered to have conversations with them. And by managers owning setting the atmosphere, then employees will, hopefully be more productive, be more engaged, and feel like they can perform better in their roles.
Now tell us a little bit, because I know some people are wanting even more, just a few more tools and a few more strategies that they can actually learn and adopt. And they can do that by getting the book. And so tell us just a little bit about the book and where we can get it.
Yeah, so People Goals is a resource to help managers and leaders, and even aspiring leaders, aspiring managers, to sharpen what I feel is one of their most important skills, and that's building relationships with their teams. So the book is available on my website, thepamweston.com. And you like hearing that, thepamweston.com. And, it's for, managers in any industry. They're able to use that book and just is a toolkit as they go along their leadership journey.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, what would you say is, if you can just give us a little high level sneak peek in regards to like, what is the one, if you had to pick one strategy or guideline from the book, which one would you pull?
So, People Goals is, 6 principles that form the word people. And I would say what's most important, well, I think they're all important. However, one that I would share is, the L is for lead. As a manager, you have to model the behavior that other employees and other managers and leaders should embrace. Mm-hmm. So you set the expectations for leadership across your organization. I think that's so important. And I think that will help address some of the things that we talked about today, where people may not feel like they can feel empowered to speak to their managers about a situation. But if you're modeling the behavior of a leader, you're going to be open, you're going to be receptive, you're going to engage, you're going to prioritize people.
Yeah. Now, you wrote in one of your articles in LinkedIn, 4 ways managers can address the elephant in the room: own employee engagement. And that was published this year, actually right at the beginning of the year, in January of 2020. So that's right, a month and a half before COVID really began to impact us.
Yeah.
And what, after now experiencing this past, 7 or so months, where we thought things would shift and be different, and we're like,
yeah.
Oh, blow over, and we're still in it. What would you add to this? Because you talk about the 4 strategies to incorporate, which is prioritize people, build relationships, demand accountability, be intentional. What would you change about this article?
So, I would really add more about managers showing their employees that they care about them. Okay. Making sure that employees understand that you value them as a person. I don't know if I shared this already, the story about that I do share a lot when I speak about Charles Plum, who is he was a fighter jet pilot in the Vietnamese War. And he had 75 successful missions before he was shot down. He was able to use his parachute and land safely, but he landed in enemy territory. So he was there in prison for 6 years. He went on to be able to live a very productive life. Years later, a guy came up to him and was like, "Hey, you're Charles Plum." He told him that he was a Vietnamese jet pilot. He told him he had 75 missions and he was shot down and that he was in prison for 6 years. And so Charles was like, well, how does this person know all this about me? Well, the person said, I packed your parachute. Well, of course, Charles was like, grateful and surprised, but it also made him reflect, all the times I interacted with this person, I never paid him any attention, never said hello to him. I never let him know that what he was doing was making a difference for us because of our different levels in the organization. So I like to share that story with managers so that helps to remind them to make sure that employees know that they're valuable and that they care about them.
Wow. I didn't see that one coming. What's interesting about that story, there's quite a few takeaways from and the one that resonates with me is that all this time this gentleman was working for him to make sure he had a safe experience, but he never knew who was responsible for that.
Exactly.
Not even by face. You know how sometimes we'll say, "Oh, I know faces. I don't remember names."
Right. If that employee had not
no connection.
Exactly. If that employee had not done his job, then Mr. Plum couldn't be where he is today. And so in the workplace, it's the same thing. We have to just think about employees and the value they bring and make sure they know that.
And know them.
Yes.
Because what if that was the wrong person on the job one day and he was out on a mission, and because that whole landing, he landed in enemy's territory. What if he had said, "Oh, one day it didn't work"?
Right. Exactly.
Experience. Yeah. But still, I'm just pulling that out to just explore all of these different scenarios.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can get out of that story,
But at the end of the day, like you said, no relationship of any. Right. He had no clue.
Right. And something else that, you asked me about, what else can managers do now? Like, what would I ask that article that I wrote? I would just really encourage managers to reach out. We're all, experiencing Zoom, and I think we're over Zoom, right?
Right.
However, so pick up the phone and just make a phone call, send a note. If there is a career accomplishment or that your employee is going to be celebrating, make sure that you do that. Don't stop celebrating your employees just because you're not in the office working together. Make sure that you know what's important to them, and then also let them know that it's important to them.
Yeah. I was really shocked, my new employer, to engage everyone. And this was earlier when COVID was hitting, impacting us, but we all had the shelter in place call in this region. And it was so interesting. We ended up doing virtual happy hour. And the virtual happy hour, I was brand new and I knew no one except for the people that I had interviewed with. And but as corny, honestly, I was like, I'm like, not really into this because I don't know anyone. I'm uncomfortable. And this is why I keep going back to doing my part as an employee. I can't put it on my leader. I had to make the decision to engage, even though I was uncomfortable because I didn't know anyone. And I'm like, this is really awkward. Like, really? Then I was like, okay, let me help myself. Let me get some iced tea and some lemonade and make my Arnold Palmer. I will have a comfortable drink, and that'll be my drink of choice. And so we fellowshipped, but I got a chance to know some people. But again, had I not did my part,
right,
I can't blame them for not engaging me had I not taken the step also.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in making sure that as an employee that, we have a role to play to make sure that we're engaged as well. It's just not on the leaders of the organization, but it is a great responsibility of leadership to make sure they set an environment where employees feel empowered to communicate and reach out.
Right. And then once you have all of that together, just going over just a few more data points, those who may be joining us later in the conversation, We're talking about employee engagement, and it has become one of the top priorities for most businesses. And here's why. Here's a couple points. Employee engagement increases productivity, 21% more profitable is actual data that has been collected. Employee engagement improves morale in the workplace, which the Pam Weston has already confirmed for us. Employee engagement reduces absenteeism. According to Gallup study, it showed that they saw a 41% lower absenteeism rate when they began to take initiative to engage employees. Engaged employees provide a better customer service experience, which we've talked about as well. And then finally, low employee engagement is costly. It costs businesses $4,129 on average to hire new talent, around $986 to onboard the new hire. So that means you lose about $5,000 each time an employee walks out your door, not to mention the unqualifiable cost of losing an experienced employee, but also this doesn't even include the marketing, the promotion, and everything else, the time to go through the whole process again. There is so much loss that happens when you disregard employee engagement. It is real. It is even more real now that we are, as they say, who's Zooming who. That's where we are now. And then as we begin to wrap up, Pam, what last words? You have the platform to talk to managers and leaders who have to take this charge initially. What last words would you tell them in regards to why this is so important in your work?
So I'll say, investing in people is worth it for a lot of the reasons that you just stated. And as a manager, if you want employees to be engaged, you have to be connected. So we have to encourage our managers to build those personal relationships on their teams and across the organization as well, because as a leader, you have reach. And also the biggest thing for me as a manager, own how your employees experience their time with you. And managers have an excellent opportunity to address the elephant in the room in a real way that builds relationships, engages teams, and improves productivity. So we just have to commit to doing the work.
Wonderful. I absolutely love it. This has been so insightful, and I'm sure that those who are listening have been able to walk away with something, whether you're the employee or the employer. Work to be done on both sides. Make sure you go and grab your book, The People Guide. Make sure you visit thepamweston.com to learn more about her, learn more about her book, learn more about her skill. You might even need to book her for your team to make sure that you are doing the work intentionally. I want to thank you so much, Pam Weston, for making time for us. We have been so educated in the nick of time with some skills to help us truly with excellence and accident. So we thank you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it talking with you.
I want to thank each of you for tuning in to another segment of Nic of Time, sponsored and powered by Sparkman Pathway to Careers and KSTL 690 AM. I am your host, Nikki Roach, and as always, it is a joy, a blessing to be with you and to share and learn with you. Don't forget, as always, remember this: you already possess everything you need to be successful. Just tap into it with your head, your heart, and your hand, and live out success as you define it. Take one day at a time. Until then, starting now, I should say, continue to do your best, be your best in purpose, on purpose. Thank you.